I didn't expect the storm to hit so hard that night. The weather had been a bit moody all week, but this was something else. A relentless, hammering rain that rattled the hospital windows and drowned out the usual sounds of the city beyond. As a security guard, I'd been assigned to this old hospital for years, keeping watch through graveyard shifts that often felt like an eternity. Most nights were quiet, and the only action came from the occasional lost visitor or restless patient wandering out of their room. But tonight, the place felt different. There was an electricity in the air that had nothing to do with the storm. My rounds took me to the 3rd floor, a place I knew too well. It was the floor where the old wing started, the one that had been sealed off long before I started working here. They said it was structurally unsound, that parts of it were falling apart, making it a safety hazard. But everyone knew the real reason. Too many staff had heard strange noises in that wing, felt cold spots, seen things that couldn't be explained. I'd never paid much attention to the ghost stories the staff liked to tell. That was until tonight. The lights flickered, and for a second I was plunged into complete darkness. The backup generator hummed to life almost immediately, casting a dim, eerie glow over the hallway. But something felt wrong. I felt it in the pit of my stomach, a weight, a sense that I wasn't alone. I swallowed hard and tightened my grip on my flashlight, scanning the hallway. Empty. I forced myself to keep moving, shrugging off the chill running down my spine. Then I saw her, a nurse I'd never seen before. She looked young, nervous, glancing down the hallway as if she was waiting for someone. I was about to ask if she was lost when I noticed her expression. She looked haunted, her eyes wide with fear. Before I could get a word out, she hurried off down the hall, her footsteps barely audible over the hum of the generator. Something about her movement felt off, the way she almost glided, never looking back. Ignoring my better judgment, I followed her, my footsteps echoing in the dim hallway. As I neared the end of the corridor, I caught the first sound. A low, guttural moan, so faint I almost missed it. I froze, straining to listen. The sound was coming from behind the rusted doors of the old wing, doors that were supposed to be sealed shut. But as I got closer, I could see they were slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness spilling out into the hall. My heart was pounding now. I took a shaky breath and reached for my radio, only to find it dead. Nothing but static. Damn it, I muttered, feeling a fresh wave of dread. I should have turned back. I knew that. But something inside me, maybe curiosity, maybe pure stubbornness, pushed me forward. I pressed my hand against the door, feeling the cold metal beneath my fingers, and pushed it open. The smell hit me first. It was stale, thick with the scent of mildew and something sickly sweet, like rotting flowers. My flashlight barely cut through the darkness, illuminating only a few feet ahead. I stepped inside, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and run. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see this through, that if I didn't, I'd regret it. The hallway stretched out before me, a long, endless tunnel of shadows. The silence was almost deafening, broken only by the soft creak of the floor beneath my boots. And then, just as I was about to turn back, I heard it, the scratching. It was subtle at first, a soft, rhythmic sound, like fingernails scraping against wood. My stomach turned as I realized it was coming from further down the hall. Each step felt like a death sentence, but I forced myself to keep moving, the scratching growing louder with every step. It was only when I reached the end of the hall that I realized the sound had stopped. I shone my flashlight down the corridor, and for a split second I thought I saw something, a figure, hunched over in the darkness, its back to me. It was dragging something across the floor, something heavy. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone, leaving only silence in its wake. I backed away, my hands shaking, trying to convince myself I hadn't really seen anything. But the air was thick with something, an energy, a presence that felt almost tangible. And then, out of nowhere, A blood-curdling scream tore through the silence, so loud and so close that I dropped my flashlight. The scream was followed by a heavy thud, the unmistakable sound of a body hitting the floor. My heart was in my throat as I fumbled for my phone, the screen barely illuminating the dark around me. My hands were shaking so badly that it took me 3 tries to dial for help. My voice came out in a whisper, barely audible, as I tried to explain what I'd seen, what I'd heard. The voice on the other end told me to stay put. That help was on the way, but I knew deep down that no one could help me now. The moments that followed felt like an eternity. The hallway stretched out before me, silent, empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, lurking just beyond the reach of the light. When security finally arrived, they found me standing there, my flashlight clutched in my hands, my eyes wide with terror. They searched the old wing, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, but they found nothing. No sign of the nurse, no source of the sounds, no explanation for the scream. As they led me back down the hallway, the lights flickered back on, casting the hospital in a harsh, unforgiving light. But the memory of that night, the moans, the scratching, the scream, has haunted me ever since. I haven't been back to the 3rd floor since that night. None of us have. The staff refuses to go near the old wing, especially during a power outage. They say the place is cursed, haunted by the souls of patients who never left. And maybe they're right. All I know is that some things are best left undisturbed, buried in the darkness where they belong. Because sometimes, when the lights go out, the shadows reveal things we were never meant to see. The wind howled around our cabin, like 1,000 voices whispering secrets into the night, but I tried to ignore it. Instead, I focused on the crackling fire, trying to keep it strong as the power had gone out hours ago. My wife, Sarah, kept our 2 kids close, their faces pale with worry. "Daddy, when will the lights come back on?" asked Ethan, my 7-year-old. His voice had that slight tremor, the kind kids get when they're on the edge of being really scared. I glanced out the frosted window. "Any minute now," I lied, forcing a reassuring smile. The storm outside was one of those relentless, bone-chilling blizzards that would have kept even the hardiest outdoorsman from venturing outside. But we were safe here. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Hours crept by. The phone lines were dead, and even the battery-operated radio gave nothing but static. I could feel the walls of the cabin pressing in, the darkness tightening like a noose around us. Then, somewhere outside, I heard it. A deep, guttural growl, low and menacing. Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "It's probably just a bear or something, caught out in the storm," I said, not entirely sure I believed it myself. The sound persisted, though, and something about it wasn't right. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. The growl circled the cabin, growing louder, closer, a chilling reminder that we were utterly alone in the middle of nowhere. I grabbed my rifle, an old hunting model I'd brought for emergencies, and motioned for my family to stay quiet. Every muscle in my body was tense as I moved to the window, wiping away a layer of frost to get a better view. The snow was a swirling blur, impossible to see through, but I could hear it. The growl circling the cabin, inching closer. Then, just when I thought it might pass, the silence shattered with a deafening crash. My heart leaped as I heard the unmistakable sound of splintering wood. Something, or someone, was trying to get inside. "Stay here," I whispered to Sarah, my voice barely audible over the raging storm and her choked sobs. The kids clung to her, wide-eyed and trembling. I crept down the stairs, the rifle held tight in my hands, each step feeling like a march towards something unspeakable. At the bottom, my worst fears were confirmed. The front door was gone, ripped clean off its hinges, lying in splinters on the floor. Cold air flooded the room, carrying with it the stench of damp earth and something else, something foul, rotten. The snow in the doorway was marred by massive footprints, impossibly large. I took a shaky breath and raised the rifle, my fingers slick with sweat. Just outside, barely visible in the swirling snow, I saw them, two glowing eyes, the color of burning embers, staring straight at me. My stomach dropped. Those eyes held a malevolent intelligence, something ancient, something predatory. Before I could think, it lunged forward, a massive shadow barreling into the room. I pulled the trigger, the shot roaring through the small cabin, but the creature barely flinched. It was a hulking mass of fur and muscle, its jaws lined with teeth that gleamed in the dim light of the fire. I kept firing, emptying the rifle as the creature advanced, my bullets having no more effect than stones thrown into a raging river. It slammed into me, knocking the rifle from my hands, its growl reverberating through my chest like an earthquake. I fought back, hitting, kicking, anything to keep it away from my family, but its strength was beyond anything human, anything animal. I could feel its hot, putrid breath on my face, its eyes boring into mine with a hunger that went beyond flesh. In a last desperate move, I managed to scramble backward, dragging myself toward the stairs. I could hear Sarah sobbing upstairs, the kids crying, their voices raw with terror. The creature advanced slowly, relishing the chase. I grabbed a broken piece of wood from the doorframe and swung it, my only weapon left. It barely seemed to notice. The struggle seemed to last forever, until, finally, there was silence. I opened my eyes, my body aching, my vision blurry, and saw nothing. The creature was gone, the doorway empty. I dragged myself up the stairs, too dazed to think straight, my only thought to get back to Sarah and the kids. But when I reached the top, the room was empty. No Sarah, no kids. Just the torn bedding, scattered toys, and the faint echo of their voices, as if they had been there only moments ago. Panic surged through me. I stumbled through the cabin, calling their names, but the only answer was the howling wind. Hours passed as I searched, frantically tearing through every room, every corner. I stumbled outside, the cold biting into me, and called their names into the empty wilderness. But there was no answer, only the endless white and the shadows cast by the towering pines. When the rescue team arrived days later, they found me alone, delirious, raving about creatures and glowing eyes. They told me there was no trace of Sarah, no sign of the kids. I tried to explain, tried to make them understand, but my words sounded hollow, insane, even to my own ears. I stayed in that cabin for days afterward, unable to leave, hoping somehow they'd come back. But every night, as the wind howled and the fire dwindled, I heard it. The growl, circling just beyond the walls, a low rumbling sound filled with a hunger that was now all too familiar. To this day, I can still hear it in my dreams, that guttural growl echoing through the darkness, a reminder of what I lost, of the family I couldn't protect. And every time I hear it, I'm reminded of one thing: the wilderness has secrets, and some of them are better left undiscovered. I'll never forget that night. The night I dared to step foot in the old Greywood Asylum. Everyone in town had heard the legends, stories of tortured souls, crazed laughter echoing through the dark halls, and shadows that moved on their own. But they were just stories, or so I thought. I should have listened. God, I should have. We were 5 that night, me, my best friend Ryan, his girlfriend Sarah, and 2 other friends, Mike and Claire. We weren't exactly believers. All of us were thrill seekers, always in search of a new adventure. So when Ryan suggested exploring Greywood, we all agreed, thinking it'd be just another spooky night for laughs. The asylum loomed over us as we approached, its jagged roof lines barely visible against the pitch-black sky. Power was out in the area, adding a chilling layer of darkness to the already ominous place. Flashlights in hand, we made our way to the entrance, our laughter echoing down the empty halls. The first steps into the asylum felt wrong. The air was thick, stagnant, carrying a nauseating mix of mildew and something metallic. Blood, maybe? I shook off the thought, reminding myself it was all in my head. I tried to laugh, but it sounded hollow, even to me. As we moved deeper into the building, the fun started to fade. Ryan, leading the group, paused as we passed through what used to be the common area. Broken chairs and decaying medical equipment were strewn about, casting eerie shadows under the beams of our flashlights. Words, no, messages, were scrawled across the walls in something dark and crusted. I didn't want to guess what it was. Sarah, always the skeptic, shone her flashlight on one particularly disturbing phrase. "They never leave." She snorted, amused, and started reading out the deranged scribbles on the wall, mocking the fear she saw creeping into our eyes. That's when we heard it. A scream. A blood-curdling, bone-chilling scream, bouncing off the walls and echoing through the halls, so loud it seemed to come from every direction. We froze, gripping each other, our flashlights dancing wildly in the darkness. Mike whispered, "Where's Claire?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't even noticed she was gone. We called out to her, each shout swallowed by the empty halls. There was no answer, just our own voices reverberating back at us. A nervous panic settled over the group. We tried to reason it out. Maybe she was playing a prank. Maybe she'd gone ahead. But deep down, I knew. Something wasn't right. We spread out, frantically searching each room we passed. The place was a maze of decay, filled with rooms that held only the remnants of madness and suffering. We stumbled over broken furniture, nearly tripping on rusted chains still bolted to the walls. My flashlight caught a glimpse of something on the floor, a smear of fresh blood trailing down the hallway. I couldn't breathe. I didn't want to follow it, but something drove me on. The others stayed close, equally horrified, but drawn to the trail like moths to a flame. It led us to a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar, with a faint light flickering from inside. I took a shaky breath, exchanged a terrified look with Ryan, and pushed the door open. Inside was a padded cell, the walls stained a sickly reddish-brown color, long dried blood splatters splashed across them like grotesque decorations. And there, sitting in the center of the room, was Claire. Her back was to us, rocking slowly, her body moving in a grotesque rhythm. She was whispering, a low, guttural sound that sent a chill through my bones. We called her name, our voices trembling, but she didn't respond. Slowly, almost as if against her will, she turned to face us. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and vacant, her lips pulled back in a twisted smile that looked anything but friendly. She was clutching a rusty scalpel, her fingers bloodied from gripping it so tightly. In a low, unnatural voice, she murmured, "They never leave." Panic gripped us. I could feel the urge to run clawing at my mind, every instinct screaming for me to flee. But something held me rooted to the spot, as if her gaze had chained me there. Ryan tried to move toward her, calling her name gently, trying to coax her back to us. But Claire just laughed, a dark, menacing sound that made my skin crawl. I felt a hand on my arm and realized Sarah was pulling me, her face pale with terror. "We have to go," she whispered, barely holding it together. She was right. Whatever this was, it wasn't Claire anymore. We stumbled back, tripping over each other in our desperate escape. I kept looking back, the image of Claire's haunting smile burned into my mind. Just as we turned a corner, her laugh rang out again, louder, echoing through the halls, mingling with the sound of our frantic breaths. The darkness seemed alive as we ran, closing in on us, whispering our names, mocking our fear. The silence around us felt heavier, more oppressive, as if the very walls held their breath, watching, waiting. Finally, we reached the exit. Bursting out into the night, we didn't stop until we were far away from that cursed place, panting, hearts racing, terror still pulsing in our veins. I glanced back at the asylum, half expecting to see Claire standing there, watching us with that twisted smile. We never went back for her, and I never forgave myself. The nightmares came, Every night after that, her vacant eyes haunting me, her laughter echoing in my mind. To this day, sometimes, late at night when everything's quiet, I still hear her laugh, and I can't shake the feeling that she's out there, waiting for me to come back.